Welcome back to the Death Row and Executions channel, where I will be discussing the next upcoming execution to take place. But before I talk about that, I want to first respond to a question that was made in the comments. I do try to read as much of the comments as possible, and sometimes I do see something of interest that I'd like to talk about. Of course, it's always great to see the very nice comments that were made by people saying that they enjoy this show. But in a question from Lindy McDonald, she asks, are there any women who are pending execution anytime in the near future? At the moment, in looking at scheduled executions between now and the year 2025, there are a whole bunch of names listed. However, there are no women on that list with a date scheduled for her death. None. The last woman to be executed was Lisa Montgomery, who was executed back on January 13 of this year. If you remember, Lisa Montgomery had been convicted and sentenced to death for strangling a pregnant 23-year-old woman to death at the victim's home in Missouri, and then slicing the woman's belly open to steal the baby. The baby gladly was later found safe. So Lisa Montgomery was executed by the federal government instead of a state, because the crime had involved her crossing over state lines. Lisa Montgomery was living in Kansas. Going back to the question, so no, there are no executions scheduled for any women, even though there are 51 women currently on death row by the last estimate provided. Executions of women is extremely rare. Since 1976, the past 45 years, when capital punishment was reinstated by the Supreme Court, only 17 women have been executed in the United States, compared to 1,522 men that have been executed during that same time period. And the next man listed to be executed is Wade Greenlee Lay, who is scheduled to be put to death on January 6th at 10 o'clock in the morning local time in Oklahoma. He will be the first death row inmate executed in the year 2022. Wade Lay was an anti-government extremist. A lot of information about his beliefs and animosity toward the government were later found during a search of his home computer. He himself would later say that he had been planning to get back at the government for their negligent involvement in the Ruby Ridge incident in 1992 and the Branch Davidians incident in 1993. For any of you who might be too young to remember, in the Ruby Ridge incident, there was a standoff with law enforcement after a man named Randall Weaver, who was wanted by the FBI, with his family and a friend, held authorities at bay for 11 days. Weaver was a white separatist and was wanted for failing to appear in court on weapons charges. Randall Weaver's wife and their 14-year-old son died in a shootout with authorities. A U.S. Marshal was also killed, but one may assume that Wade Lay didn't care about that. Wade Lay was also very upset at the United States government for what he considered an invasion of the Branch Davidians compound in Waco, Texas in 1993. About 80 Branch Davidians, a religious organization, died after a 51-day standoff with law enforcement when members of the Davidians set the building they were holed up in on fire. Authorities had suspected that the compound where the Davidians were located in Waco had been stockpiled with illegal weapons, and there were also allegations of child sexual abuse being committed by the group's leader, David Koresh. So Wade Lay was planning a revolution and war against the United States government. And he wanted to go after those responsible for the deaths he said they caused at Ruby Ridge and in Waco, Texas. And for that, he needed to put together an arsenal of weapons, something he couldn't afford, and would later say in court that he needed money for that. And that's why he decided to rob a bank. On May 24, 2004, Wade Lay had enlisted the help of his 19-year-old son, Christopher Lay. Wade Lay and Christopher Lay entered the MidFirst Bank in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They both wore ski masks and gloves. Christopher Lay confronted a bank employee and ordered him to the ground. At that moment, the bank security guard, a 36-year-old Air Force veteran named Kenneth Anderson, entered the bank's lobby. A shootout between Kenneth and the father and son duo erupted. Both Wade and Christopher Lay were wounded in the shootout. Kenneth Anderson, who was married and also the father of a 14-year-old girl at that time, was killed. Wade and Christopher Lay fled the bank without any money. They ran across a field to their parked truck and left the area. However, both men were later captured that day, arrested, and were taken to a hospital to get their wounds treated. At a joint trial that was held for both men the following year, in 2005, both father and son admitted their guilt, but said that their actions were driven by a necessity for the greater good of our country, and they did not intend for anyone to die during the bank holdup. Christopher Lay had a lawyer represent him, but his father, Wade, decided to represent himself as his own lawyer during the trial. That apparently didn't turn out well for him. A jury convicted both father and son of first-degree murder and attempted armed robbery. Wade Lay was sentenced to death, while his son Christopher Lay was sentenced to life without parole. Wade Lay was born on February 28, 1961. He is now 60 years old. He's been on death row since 2005, when he was 44. As has been the case with many upcoming scheduled executions lately, Lay's defense is now claiming that Wade Lay suffers from mental health issues, insanity, and schizophrenia, and that Wade Lay is not presently competent to be executed. One court document states the following from a doctor who treated Wade Lay. He has a severe mental illness which adversely impacts his ability to rationally understand his current situation or his pending execution. Kenny Anderson, who lost his life trying to protect the employees of the bank where he worked, has a sister named Kim who had said at the time of the killing that her brother stood just slightly over 5 feet tall. But what he lacked in size, he made up for in bravery. If you enjoy these videos about upcoming executions and other death row discussions, go ahead and subscribe to this channel so that you are alerted the next time one comes out. At this time, I'd like to wish everyone out there a great holiday season. Stay safe from the pandemic, and a very happy New Year. So see you next year. I'm Paco Rivera. Bye for now.